Welcome once again to Gavin Ashenden. Gavin, it's happened. People are saying to us both, you're exaggerating, but it's
Yes,
happened. Tell us what's happened.
the Labour government have gained power with the support of Islamic communities. So the government is in debt to them. And one of the ways the Islamic communities have asked to be repaid is to produce a, first of all, a definition of Islamophobia, which will be followed by the crime of Islamophobia. Now, what's happened is they've produced the definition. They've been working on it for a long time. We've known what they were trying to do. We've known who was trying to do it. They are the people doing it are our cultural enemies, despite the fact they have one or two conservatives in for the look of the cosmetics. We know why they're trying to do it. They're going to try and criminalize criticism of Islam, but it's done in stages. So people have been writing to me, treating me as though I'm uh, mentally underpowered. Saying, don't you realize, you silly man, this is just advice. Why are you getting so overexcited by something that has no teeth and is not important? You are crying wolf when there is no wolf, and you're an idiot. And I've had to delete several messages, Rodney, before I sent them. I wrote them, and they bring out the pompousness in you. And of course, I mean, even I can smell pompousness, even when it's mine. And so I've managed to delete all the messages first before sending them. But what I need to say to them is, how stupid do you think I am? Or how ignorant do you think I am? Have it occurred to you why I wrote as I did? Might there be any possibility there is more to this than meets your personal eye? And what's wrong with your personal eye? Well, I can tell you, Rodney, that in terms of the critics, they don't understand Islam. They don't understand the axis with the left. They don't understand the historical alliance that the left and Islam have constructed through Europe, really for decades now. And uh, they entirely misgauge the ambitions of Islam, and I expect they probably accept the premise of a multicultural society. Now, all these are the stupidities, and so it's very difficult for me to restrain writing sardonically, if not sarcastically, if not aggressively, because it makes one very, frankly, my their ignorance makes me very cross indeed. Because it will cost us our freedom. And what are the facts? The facts are that there is this alliance. The facts are that the price for the Labour government is a definition of Islamophobia. It will, of course, begin as advice. Of course, it will. One of the reasons for it beginning advice is it doesn't have to go to Parliament. So Parliament hasn't debated this. Parliament's done nothing about it. If it goes to Parliament, well, it will probably win because the Labour Party have a majority. But the House of Lords will cause it trouble. There are some really excellent people in the House of Lords who know what they're doing. Lord Pearson is one. Baroness Cox, although she's not very well, is another. There aren't many others, I'm afraid. Although Toby Young of the Free Speech Union is there, and he's probably our greatest hope at the moment. Uh, because what they intend to do is to publish it as advice. And at that point, all the local administrations and authorities will take it as effectively as a rule. I mean, it has a status of advice, but they'll say, well, this is what the government are telling us. And then, of course, the government will appoint a homophobia, an Islamophobia czar, somebody to oversee anti-Muslim hatred, as they're calling it. Uh, and there'll come a point when it moves into being law. It's a process. For goodness sake, how you see, I'm getting into the pompous crossness again. Obviously, it's intended to become a law. That's the point of it. Today, even the Daily Telegraph, which is struggling to keep up, but is the only newspaper that even tries, the rest don't even bother, has published an article where schools governed by local authority pro-Islamic culture have warned teachers that children may no longer draw Jesus, and they may perhaps no longer be able to have music lessons. Why is that? because Jesus and music are hateful to the Muslim community and spirituality. There are several hadiths. It's not in the Quran, it's in the hadiths, which preclude pictures of Jesus. Now, at this point, you may say, well, what right do they have to tell children if they can draw Jesus? And the answer is Jesus, or Isa, is in the Quran. He's their prophet. And you're no more allowed to draw a picture of their prophet Jesus than you are the Muhammad. And when we say, no, he's our Messiah, it then becomes a trial of strength. And what people fail to understand that Islam is a political movement as well as a religious one, and it depends upon strength. Allah, I doubt I've got the right gospel stop, but Allah is a God of power, God with a small g. He requires submission. You do as you're told. That's why Islam is such an enormously successful interaction between spirituality and politics, because the God that it worships was not the same as Allah. Although I've been reading some very interesting bits in Nostra Aetate, and I want to forgive the Second Vatican Council of things I've been accusing it of recently. But that's another story, another conversation. But quite an interesting bit of theology. Allah requires submission and is a God of power, and therefore the Islamic community exercise their rights to police their living space with power. And because the idiots they live amongst don't understand that, they are willing to accommodate them for the sake of multiculturalism in this reach of power. And this exercise of power will stop children drawing pictures of Jesus. No, you may remember the fuss they had in Italy recently when there was a crucifix in every room. And there's a big fuss about whether Italy, with its Catholic past and Catholic present, was allowed to display crucifixes. Well, you can be absolutely sure that there'll be no crucifixes anywhere near there's a Muslim school. Please don't forget that the Batley RE teacher is still in hiding for his life. That's the power that Islam wants to exercise. An English RE teacher in the state school teaching about Muhammad is in hiding for his life. I gave a talk the other day when I was in a kind of competition with one of the GB news presenters. We were both asked to be after dinner speakers in the House of Lords, and he gave a very moving story about how he had to be rushed into hiding because the Islamic community put a fatwa out on him, and he just had a baby, and he's recently delivered of the baby wife and his infant child, and he had to be whisked to a safe house until this had blown over, and he's back. And there was this very moving story, and everyone was very moved. But so I slipped in to my own speech the fact that if we were going to compete with fatwas, well, I had one too. I was phoned one day by Buckingham Palace saying you can't come and preach in the Royal Chapel in a month's time. MI5 have been listening to chatter. They're planning to assassinate you in the Royal Chapel, so you can't come. I said, I want to come. I can get run over tomorrow or have my head chopped off or develop pancreatic cancer, as some friends of mine has. I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing for Jesus because of the threat of death. I'm preparing for death daily. I think I might prefer to be assassinated than have pancreatic cancer, frankly, but it's not up to me. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is we can't be frightened off by death threats. I expect most of the people writing to me have no idea that either I or my friends have suffered death threats from Islam. But this is not a game. We're not playing with multiculturalism. This definition is intended to be the prelude to a law, to make what at the moment is advised and will be leapt upon by all the state agencies as the rule, ultimately to a criminal law. So it's true, I put a hyperbolic headline on my article because I wanted people to read it. I wanted people to read it, and I hope they'd have the wit to know that I was writing about the thin end of the wedge that was going to become the very thick end of the wedge.
Let's look at reality in the United Kingdom. We're a soft touch, Gavin. We brought our children up to be diverse from a very early age. and they get even worse at uni, and they come out, and the rest of us are saying, "Oh, well, it's going to be watered down. Let's continue putting our head in the sand." Is it going to be watered down?
Rodney, it isn't. I've been trying to simplify the struggle that we're in, following the principle of Occam's razor, by reducing it to the simplest, almost cartoon-like narrative of what's going on in our culture. And if I can repeat it for a moment in case anyone hasn't heard it, effectively there are three major figures of influence determining how people live, and they are Jesus, Marx, and Muhammad. The difference between them is that both Marx and Muhammad have utopian visions they want their followers to implement, which depend upon force. And as a result, both Islam and Marxism have killed the most enormous numbers of people. So I think in the article I wrote yesterday, I quoted, I forget the figure exactly, is it 70,000 terrorist attacks since 2011 worldwide, with over 300,000 people killed by the Muslims. The death toll over the last 100 years, if you include China along with Russia, is something like 150 million people killed in the experiment to impose Marxism. So we're surrounded by these two other philosophies. Now, behind, say, you have Jesus, Marx, and Muhammad. You might say, well, what about the people who are non-aligned? Basically, the people non-aligned in our culture are coasting along behind Jesus. They've got all the benefits of the Jesus culture. The Jesus culture you can define by compassionate love, which is predicated upon forgiveness of by God of us, which we offer to others, and to exercise to produce a transformation of human beings without force but by love. That's the difference between these three philosophies. Christians should not, though obviously they fail, we all fail in living up to the standards. We should not use force. We should live by the Spirit. But it's always been a very difficult compromise for Christians in a world dominated by evil. Jesus tells us very clearly that the prince of this world is the devil. The book of the Apocalypse tells us that the devil came down to earth and is a bit upset because his time is short. So we live in a highly contested environment where good and evil are at each other, and evil uses force. So the history of the church over 2,000 years is how people who believe in the supremacy of compassionate love manage to deal with the force that they're surrounded with. And that's complicated. I mean, there are times when you turn the other cheek and you mop it up, and there are other times when you fight for your life because you don't want evil to rape your wives and daughters. And you have to distinguish which of those responses you're going to take. They're both open to you as Christians. But those are the three worldviews. And at the moment in our culture, they've crystallized. So we are in Europe being faced by a very powerful left-wing force determined to impose an egalitarian society on us by passing laws that interfere with our freedom of speech and freedom of thought and freedom of action on the one hand. And they have let in as co-allies hundreds of thousands and millions of Muslims. 40% of the Muslims in the United Kingdom want Sharia law. Well, do I need to explain what Sharia law involves? So, I mean, that's an enormous number of the enormous number that we have let in. So we are surrounded by these two forces. And if people want to accuse me of being hyperbolic or intemperate, or I would hope crystal clear, it's because that's the struggle we're in. And at the moment we're losing the struggle. If I knew a way of winning the struggle, I would say so. But there are only two options. And the fact is, we either have to convert the people around us to believe in Jesus and repudiate the force. I turn to Christ. I repent of my sins. I renounce evil. I say my baptism promises almost every time I do a broadcast, almost wherever I go. It's crystallized to me that that's my life motif. Or we drive them up by force. Now, the trouble is, if you stand up and say in this country, you must drive out by force, whether it's repatriation or some other way, the probability is you'll end up in prison more quickly than you expected to. So I don't go around saying you must drive them out by force or forcibly repatriate them, although Rupert Lowe has been saying such things. He's the very first person to bring it out into the public space. I do say what I've been trying to do to all my neighbors, Muslim, secular, and others, that we must convert them to Jesus. Jesus is very much more attractive than Mohammed or Marx. We have a winner here. But the difficulty we have is persuading the occluded neighbors that we live amongst that Jesus there is their salvation. He's their salvation socially, politically, emotionally, spiritually. In every way, Jesus is now the salvation of people who live in Europe. And if they turn to him and if they live out that life, they could be saved and our culture could be saved. If they don't, then it will become to a trial of force. And I don't know what will happen then, but I don't look forward to it.
No, indeed. And is there any sense in the fact that we have the Church of England, head honcho, saying nothing, doing nothing? We have a king that continually praises Islam. It's not looking good.
Well, I prefer to hold myself to account first before I hold other people to account. Um, but the fact is, we know it only too well that our culture has sold out. I think the only question really is whether it's knowingly sold out. It's about accountability, isn't it, and blame. I don't think that the poor woman who was senior nurse and much given to praising abortion and gay marriage really knows what she's doing. I think the prayer is, Father, forgive her. She hasn't a clue. But they've made this nurse who hasn't got a clue Archbishop of Canterbury. They probably have more culpability than she does. As for the king, um, I don't know if he knows. I think I'm past caring. I mean, it's not for me to judge him, but it's clearer to me now that whatever kind of constitutional king you're going to have, he has the opportunity to defend his people. And there are two acts of defense that the king is morally obliged to engage in, as far as I can see. The first one is interfering with the progress of the rape gang inquiries, because the girls in their hundreds of thousands who have been raped and hidden behind the false accusation of racism are his subjects. And he has a duty to protect his subjects by whatever means are available. And the means that are available to him are ones of influence. He can influence ministers, he can influence society, he can speak out. He's not speaking out about what must be, I think, along with abortion, one of the most grotesque crimes that we've encountered in our lifetime. Uh, and the other thing he should speak out about is freedom of speech. We must have freedom of speech to be English, to protect our culture. And the reason why you and I are talking to them at the moment is that this piece of advice that creates essentially what is going to be the crime of Islamophobia is going to curtail our free speech. So the king should defend free speech because his forebears were part of an enterprise to Christianize our society. They didn't do well all the time. They had to be held to account. They had to shape up. And in the normal mess of human struggle, some of them did better than others. But however well or badly they did, what about him? What is his responsibility today, particularly as he bears the honour that Parliament gave one of his forebears as defender of the Church of the Protestant faith, which is what his Fid Def stands for. So let him do it, but he's not doing either. And frankly, if he does neither, then although I'm not, again, the difficulty is, well, where do you go from here? Well, there is a Catholic monarch. I don't suppose there's a remote chance in human history of getting the Catholics back, but they do a better job than these defunct Protestants would. Or there's a republic, but the problem with the republic is they'll just appoint Ken Livingstone or somebody to be our president, and it's even possible that Ken Livingstone would be a worse head of state than Charles III. So be careful what you wish for. But he should be acting differently, in my opinion.
Gavin, you were chaplain to Queen Elizabeth II, and can you, in all conscience, say, wow, if I was chaplain to King Charles, things would be on a different level?
No, Rodney, they wouldn't at all because people don't understand what being a chaplain to the royal family involves. It just involves dressing up and going to garden parties and occasionally being asked where you've come from. And you know, and it's like a sort of it's like an ecclesiastical MBE. It doesn't give you the right to say or do anything, and it's entirely decorative. People sometimes say, "Oh, Mr. Ashenden, you're such a pompous, self-regarding git. You don't even bother to tell everybody there were 35 other chaplains, and everyone thinks you were the chaplain to the Queen." And I don't know how many times you can go on saying to people, "Look, this is a." This is a kind of pantomime of English culture. It's a very nice pantomime. Although, to be honest, I was getting a bit fed up with the garden parties. I used to kind of there are two bands that appear, a kind of northern band and a southern band. And so, I mean, I would just wander between the bandstands drinking tea, and occasionally people would stop me and ask me if I was a cardinal. So, do you know, there's a lovely bit in Four Weddings and a Funeral where what's his name comes down the stairs at the last wedding and says, "Oh yes, I have Oscar Wilde's fax number. Would you like it?" And it was, the garden parties were sort of at that level of ignorance. Are you a Roman Catholic cardinal? No, I'm just a common or garden clergyman who's become decorative at Buckingham party tea parties, but they call me a chaplain with all the implications. There is no purchase. The only thing that happens. So this is, I mean, they made a mistake, of course, by and they were so sweet. They made me a chaplain because they didn't want to give me any wider responsibility in the church, and so it was a kind of way of palming me off into a very cheerful cul-de-sac. They're perfectly entitled to do that. I'd have caused mayhem as a bishop. They're very sensible of them. Exactly the right kind of professional judgment you'd hope for from people running an organization. So they palmed me off into this cup. But what they didn't realize was that in the public imagination, there's a great deal more excitement about being associated with the royal family than there is about being an Anglican assistant bishop. No one really cares about Anglican assistant bishops. They don't know about them. They have no impact. They don't say anything. But to be associated with the royal family, that makes the blood roar. And so, without meaning to, they gave me a platform that I didn't intend to use. In fact, I was very restrained all the way through. I knew I minded my manners. I didn't abuse the privilege. But as it happened, during the years that I was a chaplain, things got worse, and people in the press asked me questions, and they introduced me with what I was, which was one of the 36 cosmetic chaplains to the royal family. And they didn't put in cosmetic, but they should have done. I mean, I invited them to, but they wouldn't do it. So I then got a more colourful platform than I would have had otherwise. I think that's God's sense of humour. I think it was very, very funny of him to do that. If they'd made me an Anglican bishop, I'd have disappeared down the toilet of history without a trace, and happily so. But because they foolishly, well, they sensibly tried to shove me into this elegant Gilbert and Sullivan side turning, it's given me a platform. And what I didn't realize at the time was after I had to resign for complaining about the reading of the Quran in the Epiphany service, which I think any Anglican clergyman should complain about, was that it's just as influential being an ex-chaplain to the Queen as it is being a present chaplain. The only difference is that if you're an ex-chaplain, you can say what the heck you like. I mean, if you're a present one, you can't. So I never tell people to include it, but they love it because they love the pomp and the circumstance. And it makes me sound more important than I really am. I try and deflate that as best I can, but it doesn't stop people ever. Would it have made any difference if I had anything to do with the palace? Yes, it would have shut me up. And there were things I would not have been able to say just out of politeness unless I resigned. So I would always have to have resigned to do or say anything. So no, it would have been made matters much worse, I think.
Mm.
Sorry for the rant, Rodney, but
All right. No,
time to clear the books,
yes.
entertain the customers, clear
Good,
the
good to
decks.
get it off your chest. Listen, if we're talking about wars, holy wars, is it a holy war against Iran in any sense?
Well, it depends on whether we can agree on the facts. Not everyone agrees on what the facts are. Um, I don't know enough about the Catholic definitions of holy war to tell you what the official Catholic position ought to be. I do know that people disagree about it. Um, but you know, Rodney, there are times when I'm perfectly happy to exercise my own opinion quietly. So if this was a discreet private conversation, and you weren't asking me to speak as a Catholic or in the public place, I would say to you something like this. I'm obviously not doing that now, but this is what I would do if you asked me privately. I would say that I personally was entirely convinced that the Iranian regime intended to put together enough uranium, processed uranium, to make a bomb, and that in my own mind, I would think the chances of them nuking Israel to obliteration were probably about 80%. And that if they nuked Israel to obliteration, all kinds of dreadful things might follow from that nuclear holocaust. And I spent the whole of my life in the shadow of nuclear war. And if you know anything about the prospect at all, it's enough to make you despair of being a human being. So stupid are we. But the problem is that up until now, we've managed conceptually and philosophically with the idea of mutually assured destruction. Surely no one in their right mind would want to destroy their enemy at the expense of their own destruction. Trouble is, we're not in our right minds. And even in the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 or three, I think, there was a miscommunication. Technology let us down. The Russians thought that the Americans had launched an attack on them, and there was a great deal of pressure to respond immediately. Now, the attack hadn't been launched, but the response might have done, and then we'd have all blown most of the world to smithereens. And the nuclear winter that would follow a nuclear onslaught would kill people outside the immediate radiation. So, nuclear weapons are really, really serious. If it is an unholy act, to allow circumstances to develop where there's a very serious likelihood of nuclear destruction taking place, then I think you might make an argument for it being a holy act to stop the unholiness happening. And therefore, my own personal judgment is I'm extremely grateful for Donald Trump for reversing the idiotic, lunatic foreign policy that Biden pursued, which appeared to not only facilitate but to encourage the Iranian regime. And again, I wrote an article the other day, and people thought that I was somehow being provocative or Islamophobic. I wrote about the fact that Shia Islam, particularly the Twelvist subsection of it, is an apocalyptic, eschatological expression of Islam, which believes, some of which, because they're not universal in this, but some of them believe it is the duty of Muslims to bring about the apocalypse in order to bring back the theocratic rule of God. They happen to be Twelvists in Iran. There are some of them that believe they have a duty to bring about an apocalypse, a nuclear apocalypse. It's a religious duty. I would say they're not exactly in their right minds, but that's my own personal view. But that's why I put the prospect of nuclear obliteration as high as 80%, because they are spiritually, religiously, politically committed to the idea. When it was bad enough when you just had secular atheists with dodgy technology doing it, but to have people who are committed to the principle of it, for God's sake. So, thank you, Donald Trump, for going in. Please go and get all the uranium and take it away from them so they can't do it again. Because of all the people in the world who are likely to produce nuclear annihilation, it's these people. It is the Twelvist Shiite Islamic politicians who are most likely of all people to do it. So please make it impossible for them ever to do it. And then maybe we'll just, content ourselves with occasional genocides and, rather lower key wars like that, which, are not very nice, but they're a great deal less bad than nuclear holocausts. So yes, I think you could make a case for saying I don't think I'd want to use the word just war, because I think what it does is it it involves us in a use of language that that means that we would then argue about things. I think that in a way that takes us away from what's really going on. I don't want to argue with anyone about what's just or even what's holy, but I would like to say, I mean, it's a bit like people are very excited about my affection for Israel. And there are very convoluted arguments about, does Israel have a right to be there given by God? And are you therefore doing the right thing by God to support them? And I want to cut through all that theological stuff, much of which is beyond my pay grade and I don't understand, and say, I like democracies. And there's only one democracy in the Middle East, and I rather like it. And therefore I'm politically inclined to be supportive of a country that wants to support itself. And then when people say, yes, but they're invaders, they've taken land that doesn't belong to them, I say, yes, and so did the people around them. That's how they got there. They invaded. They took the land that didn't belong. I had a huge argument with ChatGPT the other day. I was asking it for some facts, and I was asking it for some theological discussion, and it kept on saying to me, and I asked it. I said, "Why are you treating the Jews who have it? Let us say the Jews invaded and stole the land. Let's. I don't think they did, but well, some of them may have done. But let's concede that. Let's concede these blighters went in and by force of arms or intelligence took some land and lived there. I'd say, so did the people they took it from. That was what happened in the 6th and 7th and 8th century. Muslim Arabs came up and they took the land from the people who lived there and they lived in it. Now, I don't see any moral difference between these two people. Why? There isn't any. If you live in the land and you can hold it by force against the people who want to take it from you by force, well, do it. And if you want to do it as democracy, I will support the people who do it as a democracy. I'm just supporting a democracy in the Middle East. And this doesn't involve Zionism or covenant theology or anything else. It just means I like democracies. Now, Rodney, if you were to tell me that you actually prefer a theocracy in the Middle East, and one particularly that stones women to death or cuts people's hands off or beheads people or sends terrorist groups out, I'd say you're most welcome to do that. And I would just disagree with you. And I would say that I hope my democracy, the one I support, actually defends itself successfully against your rather unpleasant theocracy. As far as I'm concerned, that's the end of the argument.
Finally, Gavin, tell me, I see, fearing this, I suppose, people, however much they water down this bill, Christians being got off the street for preaching in big numbers. I see that it would be so easy for people to be taken to court, mainly God-fearing Christians. And the jails are full already, aren't they?
Well, they'll be arrested and then let go rather than most of the time, they'll be arrested and then dissuaded from doing what they were doing by the inconvenience of having the British police cart them off somewhere to cool their heels. And then, since it costs too much money to lock them up, I expect most of them will be released. That's the way the police have been doing it up until now. I expect they'll go on doing it. Yes, the police have turned against us. The military have turned. The whole establishment has been taken over by the left. This has been one of the arguments I've been presenting. It's too late even to be a conservative because you would conserve the agencies formerly thought to be the pillars on which our society has been built, but they've been taken over by the lefts who have an agreement with Islam. So there's nothing to conserve. And that's one of the reasons why people like Nick Fuentes in America is telling his demoralized white friends, not that he's white, he's half Mexican, that they might as well burn it down. Since the Antifa thugs are trying to burn everything down in order to bring about their new Marxist society, well, the dispossessed white might as well burn it down too. So that's what we've been brought to. We've been brought to two generations of people on the left and the right who just want to burn everything down. And frankly, I can see why.
Certainly in both sides of the pond, we're reaching tipping points.
Yes,
Maybe it's
yes.
too late, Gavin.
Oh yes, Rodney, it's much too late. It's been too late for a long time. I mean, it's too late because you and I won't be here in 10 years' time. I mean, we'll both be dead. So it's too late for us. But on the other hand, we won't see it. Well, we might, who knows? We may in purgatory be forced to see things going on that we were responsible for and didn't do enough about. Well, so I take that back. Who knows? It's too late for our civilization. It's not too late for the Holy Spirit. I mean, in essentially, what are we talking about? The danger is that you and I can get lured into thinking it's about politics and freedom, but it isn't. It's about salvation. We're preparing to go to heaven, and our Lord has asked us to make this place as much like heaven as possible before we get there, as a form of kind of wait, an antechamber. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. I disagree with people like N.T. Wright, who have moved a lot further politically and see this as a political project rather than a pneumatological project, a salvific project. But as far as I'm concerned, God has made this place already, because I'm a Neoplatonist, very much like heaven. And in terms of the beauty of it, the exquisite, exquisite, breathtaking beauty. And we are required to try and match the beauty of our circumstances with a moral and a political, a social beauty, which we fail to do. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as in heaven. But essentially, we're preparing for heaven. So all we can do is say to our neighbors, Jesus wanted you to make this as much an antechamber of heaven as possible. But if you want to make it an antechamber to hell, well, that's up to you. And then when Christians have been on the losing end, they've gone to the catacombs and tried to avoid as much of hell as they can. There's nothing virtuous in suffering hell unnecessarily. And when they've managed to convert enough of the people around them, they've set about making an antechamber to heaven as best they can. So we're just on the hellish side of the pendulum at the moment, Rodney, but we'll be elsewhere soon.
Well, there you go. I don't know whether to rejoice or to feel very sad, but
Always rejoice. Always
always
rejoice.
rejoice.
We're on the winning. Hey, the reason for rejoicing is that God has made us. God loves us. God will welcome us. God will judge us. All be well, as Julian says. Even our screw ups will be turned into the fuel of redemption. So we always rejoice. It's just, and we're not wholly responsible, you and I. I mean, we're two old buffers. Shall I use the F word? As in ART, we're two old buffers who are praying for the world and trying to do what we can to make it an antechamber to the kingdom of heaven by bringing people to Jesus. We've both tried awfully hard, and where we've failed, he says nice things to us and invites us to start again. So no, I've every good reason to rejoice. I feel very sorry for people who can't see and who, for all kinds of reasons, don't have the vision that God has given us that allows us to rejoice at all times.
Gavin, we'll see you very shortly, I think.